now that you've figured out how to set up Collaborate, let's move on to discussing how you will facilitate your live lectures. We're going to spend a little bit of time sharing some tips and tricks that have been gathered from instructors who have successfully led live lecture sessions. We hope these tips and tricks will help you as well. We're going to get started by talking about pre-session preparation. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about how do you engage your learners during live lectures. It's just a different medium. It's not quite like being in a classroom. It's similar, and so there's some tips we'll give you for how to engage students during a live lecture. And then finally, wrapping up your live lecture. Before the session even begins, it would be a good idea, especially in week 1, to send out a reminder. You can do this using the announcements or an email or a combination of the two. Of course, you will always want to log in early to test your sound and microphone. Logging in early usually means 15 to 30 minutes before the session begins. Particularly the first time you lead a live lecture session, log in at least a half an hour early so that you have time to test everything, because occasionally changes on your computer can cause changes in Collaborate. Every week you should log in early, however, to make sure that nothing changed on your computer and because students will be logging in and getting ready for the session as well. As students are logging in and getting ready for the session, monitor the user area. Look for new participants. You can also monitor the chat area to see if any students are posting messages for you in the text area. Perhaps they're telling you that they're having difficulties with their audio or video, and you can direct them to the help desk. Occasionally, students will also post questions about weekly information and content in the course, so it's just a great way to keep in touch with your students while you're waiting for the session to start. You also will want to keep your email open and your phone handy in case a student reaches out to you that way if they're experiencing some technical difficulties. All right, moving closer to actually starting your session. Before you join your live lecture, you really need to plan your work and work your plan. Have an agenda, a purpose, and outcome ready for your live lecture. Instructors that have tried to wing it or just hold open office hours have found that those types of sessions tend to not be very engaging or successful, and student participation is usually fairly low. However, if you let your students know ahead of time that you will be presenting lecture information, that you will be working through homework problems, doing a hands-on demonstration, engaging students in a in-class debate, etc., they'll be much more likely to attend and come prepared for the session. Once you have your plan and your agenda ready, you'll likely put this into a PowerPoint format. You'll want to load your PowerPoint early before the session begins, because sometimes when you're loading your PowerPoint in Collaborate, your audio and video will cut out. You want to do that in the pre-session 15 to 30 minute window so you can get everything loaded. You might even type a quick message in the chat window just telling students you're loading your PowerPoint. It takes a minute or two because what it does when you load your PowerPoint is it actually converts PowerPoints into images. And that is the only type of file that Blackboard Collaborate can accept. So what do you do if you have an Excel chart or a Word document you'd like to share? Well, you can copy and paste content into PowerPoint and load it as a PowerPoint. You can capture screenshots of charts or tables or graphs or images and also put them into PowerPoint or just upload them as a single image file. And you can also use the screen sharing capability within Blackboard Collaborate to show documents or applications on your desktop. Okay, so we've come to probably one of the most important things about pre-session preparation that you need to remember. Some instructors will even write a sticky note on their computer monitor to remind them of this, and that is press the record button. The record button is found in the upper right corner. If you're like me, at some point you will forget to push the record button, and that's a real bummer because you're going to have to go back and record the whole session again so the students who were not able to participate live have a recording to watch. So again, this is probably one of the most important things you can do. And whenever you hit that record button, if it isn't already recording, you'll hear that little message to know and be confident that your session is getting recorded. All right, so you've set yourself up for a great session with a great agenda. Your students are entering the class, your PowerPoint is loaded, and you are ready to go. So as your session gets started, you'll want to establish openness and community. And one way to do this is to greet learners by name as they enter the classroom. So you'll want to do this again by monitoring the chat windows and the participant windows to see your students as they join. It's just a great way to say, "Hi Molly, how are you? Welcome to the class. We're going to get started in about 5 minutes." Once all the students have joined and you're ready to start your session, you'll want to establish some logistical ground rules. One ground rule that seems to work really well is to ask students to use the raise a hand option to ask a question. The reason for this is that sometimes students talk over each other, much like occurs in a conference call when people on the phone are accidentally talking over each other. Using the raise a hand, it allows you to call directly on the learner, and you even see in sequence who raised their hand first, 1, 2, 3, and you can call on them down the row. You can also use the polling option, either a check mark or the ABCD options, to ask quick questions, or you can say, "Students, as I'm moving along, if I'm moving too fast, post a red check mark," or you can ask quick check-in questions. And lastly, you might want to suggest that your students turn their microphone off when they're not talking. Again, this helps prevent people accidentally talking over each other. And also, you'll remember in our introduction to Blackboard Collaborate, you learned that only 6 people can have their microphones on at any given time. So turning their microphone off is a good way to make sure if someone wants to talk, they can click the talk button and have their voice be heard. It also eliminates unintentional background noise, such as a child walking into the room or a dog barking. So turning off the microphone when not talking is a good practice you could get your students into starting in week 1. And again, we already talked a little bit about having an engaging environment. So when you talk to students in the live lectures, you'll want to remember to call on them by their name, just as you would in your classroom. So when a student asks a question or raises their hand, you can go ahead and call on them by name. You'll also want to repeat chat area questions. The reason that you want to repeat chat area questions is because chats can actually move pretty quickly in the chat window down in the bottom left corner of your Collaborate window. So the chat question that you're responding to may no longer be visible in that window, and it just helps all of the students and have context regarding the question that you're answering. Why do you think we would make the suggestion not to ask if there are any questions? So you probably get the idea. If you ask the question, "Are there any questions?" you'll be met with an awkward silence, similar to the way you might be in class at times. And it's even more awkward and silent in the online environment. Instead, you can ask open-ended questions with specific prompts. Like, in our week 1 homework, we were talking about networking and communication. Can someone give me a specific example of when networked communications has enabled you to do your job in a way that wouldn't be possible without it? Those are the types of questions that have answers that students can easily respond with. Again, using their names as you confirm their responses just helps to personalize the lecture and make them feel connected. We're going to wrap up our discussion about engaging learners in live lectures with a few tips on how you can use different strategies in your live lecture sessions. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but it's just a couple of ideas to help get your creative juices flowing as you consider using live lectures in your classrooms. You can have learners present either presentations or information that they've researched on the internet and brought into the classroom. You can give the learners control of the whiteboard to build out a formula or example from a lecture or homework. You can pre-assign questions to students or groups and let them know that they will be called on to answer at some point during the upcoming lecture session. You can hold live debates between different groups within the class. You can have students present case study summaries, and then they can engage each other in discussing the differences and similarities that they developed in their case write-ups. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but hopefully this gives you a few ideas that you can use as you move forward. Hopefully your session went great. So as you wrap up your lecture, you may want to wait a few minutes till all of your students have exited the Blackboard Collaborate environment. If a student inadvertently remains logged into that session, the system won't know to end the session and start processing the recording. So after everyone has left the session, go ahead and click that End Recording button. And if someone has inadvertently left themselves logged in, you can right-click on their name and have them exit the session. You'll want to go check in your classroom in the Recordings tab that we looked at in our last presentation. But do note that recordings may take up to an hour or possibly even longer depending on bandwidth issues and the length of your lecture. You should see your recording link within about an hour. So I hope this presentation has been helpful in helping you prepare for your live lecture. Again, there are many ways you can use live lecture sessions to build community, help students engage in hands-on work in your classroom, present information, and show their mastery of content in your classrooms. We hope you enjoy this dynamic tool and have a great session.